Picture this. 3,000 years before you were even born, a civilization was busy building structures so incredibly massive and so perfectly precise that even today, armed with lasers, computers, and modern cranes, we still can't fully explain exactly how they pulled it off. We're talking about ancient Egypt, of course. But hey, this isn't the dusty textbook version you might remember from school. Okay, let's dive into this explainer and uncover 10 insane facts that will completely change how you view this ancient world.
Section 1. Mind-bending ancient timelines.
So, when the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed way back around 2560 BC, it scraped the sky at an incredible 481 feet tall. But here is the truly mind-blowing part. It held the record for the tallest human-made structure on Earth for an astonishing 3,800 years. Seriously, it wasn't until the Lincoln Cathedral was built in England in the 1300s AD that anything finally surpassed it. Entire empires rose and fell. The Roman Colosseum was built, used, and totally abandoned, and this single tomb just stood there, towering over human history.
And this brilliantly illustrates a timeline that completely shatters our perception of history. The pyramids were built around 2560 BC, right? Well, Cleopatra, the famous Egyptian ruler, was in power around 30 BC. That is a massive gap of roughly 2,500 years. Now compare that to the time from Cleopatra's reign to Neil Armstrong walking on the moon in 1969. That's only about 2,000 years. That means Cleopatra lived closer to our modern space age than she did to the people who built the pyramids. And she actually used to visit those same pyramids as tourist attractions. Think about that the next time you look up at the moon.
Section 2. Strange Science and Rituals.
Okay, brace yourself for this one. Ancient Egyptian physicians used to take moldy bread and apply it directly to open wounds and infections. Gross, right? But here's the absolute genius part. They were performing accidental microbiology. They didn't know exactly why it worked, but that mold was actually producing natural antibiotic compounds. This is the exact same basic principle behind penicillin, which wasn't officially discovered until Alexander Fleming found it in 1928. That's right. The Egyptians were curing infections with antibiotics 3 whole millennia before modern scientists even knew what a microbe was.
Now, the mummification process wasn't just about wrapping a body in bandages. It was a highly organized and, frankly, total gross-out surgical procedure. Embalmers actually believed the brain was completely useless, so they would insert a hooked tool right up through the nostril, break through a thin bone, and physically pull the brain out in pieces just to throw it away. But the heart? Oh, that was left completely intact inside the body. Egyptians believed the heart was the actual center of memory, emotion, and judgment. They thought it would literally be weighed against a feather by the god Anubis in the afterlife to determine their eternal fate.
365. The Egyptians weren't just about mummies. They were incredibly astute astronomers. They noticed that the star Sirius rose in the sky right before the Nile River flooded, every single year, like absolute clockwork. Using that super reliable stellar pattern, they invented a highly accurate 365-day calendar. They broke it down into 12 months of 30 days, plus 5 extra days just for festivals. This system was so amazingly precise that it directly influenced the Julian calendar, making it the direct ancestor of the calendar apps sitting on your smartphone right this very second.
Section 3. Busting Famous Egyptian Myths.
So the crucial point is that the pyramids were absolutely not built by slaves being whipped in the desert sun. Archaeologists have uncovered worker villages near Giza that completely rewrite this whole Hollywood myth. These were skilled, paid laborers. They lived in organized villages, complete with bakeries and breweries, and they even received medical care for on-the-job injuries. They were paid handsomely in bread, beer, and grain, working in highly organized shifts. And we know for a fact they were proud of their work too, because they actually left behind ancient graffiti on the stones, bragging about their specific construction teams. Which brings us to a massive myth. Did Napoleon's soldiers really shoot off the Sphinx's nose? You've almost certainly heard this story, right? That careless French troops used one of the world's greatest monuments for target practice during their campaign in Egypt. It is a gripping story for sure, but is it actually true? Absolutely not. Historical accounts actually suggest a Sufi man named Muhammad al-Saim damaged the nose in the 1300s. And if that isn't proof enough for you, we have actual sketches of the Sphinx drawn by European travelers in the 1700s, long before Napoleon ever even set foot in Egypt, and the Sphinx is already missing its nose in those drawings. Napoleon's troops are completely exonerated on this one.
Section 4. Power, Rulers, and Protection.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the iconic thick black Egyptian eyeliner
wasn't just a bold fashion statement. This lead-based makeup, known as kohl, was actually a highly effective environmental shield. The thick black lines absorbed harsh glare from the desert sun. But even more incredibly, modern studies suggest that the low levels of lead in the makeup stimulated an immune response that actually helped fend off bacterial eye infections, which were super common around the Nile. It was so practical that it was worn equally by both men and women across all social classes.
Speaking of power and presentation, let's take a look at Hatshepsut. She didn't just rule as a queen, she claimed the highest possible title. She ruled as a full pharaoh, a king. But there was a unique problem here. Egyptian art and tradition simply had no visual language for a female king. So, to cement her absolute power and divine right to rule, Hatshepsut adapted. She is often depicted in statues wearing the traditional false beard of the pharaoh. She definitely did not let gender norms get in the way of visual, absolute authority.
And you know what? Her strategy worked brilliantly. 20. Hatshepsut's reign lasted for over 20 incredibly peaceful and economically prosperous years. She launched massive building projects and established vital trade routes, securing her legacy not just in Egypt, but as one of the most successful, longest-ruling, and powerful female leaders in all of world history.
Section 5. An unmatched historical legacy. Let's move to and see how this builds into our final, mind-expanding realization.
The ancient Egyptian civilization, as a continuous, functioning culture, lasted for roughly 3,000 years, from about 3100 BC to 30 BC. Now, compare that to the entire span of time from the year 0, the birth of Christ, all the way to today. That is just over 2,000 years. This means one single civilization maintained its identity, its religion, its art, and its power for significantly longer than the entirety of what we casually call modern recorded history. We call them ancient, but they were incredibly ancient even to themselves.
Ancient Egypt wasn't just a static world of pyramids and mummies. It was 3 millennia of dynamic science, brilliant politics, and breathtaking art that fundamentally shapes our world today. So here's a question for you. If a single civilization thrived for 3,000 years of science, art, and politics, achieving things we are still struggling to fully understand today, what incredible secrets are waiting to be uncovered in empires that are even older than Egypt? Keep exploring the past, folks, because human history is always deeper than you think. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.